Yeah, I got it going
Okay.
now.
Wait, they let a stranger
Very well.
bubbling her?
Hey, no.
It's a familiar face, Jay. Define stranger.
During
I
the
thought we
thick of
trained you
the,
better than that. You worked at
pandemic.
Disco. Well, anybody in the building.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so Superintendent's going to open Subcommittee. I just got home.
And that Mo, she sure can talk.
Do that.
Oh, wait. Sam, is that still on? The TV monitor?
Oh, yes, it should be. If you connect to
Yeah, let me just.
your PC, it should show up automatically.
See, Vicky, for your predictability of knowing where to sit, now you can figure it out again.
It's true. You can have your seat back. You can do what you want.
I'm good over here.
I did ask a question, he pointed to you sitting right there.
So, no.
Vicky, okay. All right.
Show me motion, face it. Oh, you're trying to see the screen. They're actually live person here.
It's like that.
Yeah, well, that's why you don't want to sit on that side. Although now the cameras, remember the guy used to film it, standing in here, but yeah, you go that. Right, locker. Right.
I'm already having to walk this.
Okay, welcome, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order at 7:05 p.m. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, to start off tonight's meeting, I'm going to need a motion to approve the minutes of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the agenda is approved. Next, I need a motion to approve the open session minutes from June 7th, 2021.
Make a motion to approve the open session minutes of June 7th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes approved. And finally, I'm going to need a motion to approve the executive session minutes from June 7th, 2021.
Make a motion to approve the executive session minutes of June 7th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and executive session minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda tonight will be superintendent's comments.
All right, good evening, everybody. Just a few quick items. First and foremost, just some good news. And again, I think just like going into the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, things are rapidly evolving. Last Wednesday afternoon, the Department of Education Commissioner Jeff Riley shared even more updated guidelines with all superintendents across the state, and specifically around guidance around summer school and some of the planning moving forward for next school year. Specifically, the safety and mitigation strategies and distancing will still be in place for summer school. However, masking, universal masking, will be strictly optional and left to districts and schools to make that decision based upon the infection rates within the community. And then he was very explicit around barring any changes in the virus progression, there will be no restrictions next school year. So none of the restrictions, no distancing, no universal masking. So it's kind of percolating. I started to see it in my Twitter feed this morning and in the press releases because he followed it up over the weekend with an email. But I think that's welcome news that next school year will even get back to normal even more. Second piece is you have in your packet a proposal from Habib and Associates, which is an architectural firm that we have familiar with. Back in 2011, 2012, they did the project, the debt exclusion project for the roof and the boiler project at MISCO, and they've given us an initial proposal to do kind of the architecture, the timeline, the bidding, and running the bidding process for the Nipmuc boiler replacement. So Jay, maybe if you could speak to a little bit more. Jay's kind of been spearheading this, your interactions with Habib and Associates and some of the next steps.
Sure, I'll come sit over here. Yeah, so what they put together now is their fees for basically putting the construction documents together. We don't have anybody that has the expertise to actually put out an engineering design and do all the various scope of work that has to get done to do this correctly. So if you remember back in like January, February, we went out to bid for what's called a house doctor. And they were the winning bid. We worked with them before, that was very helpful. They basically are sort of on call for us now for the next 5 years for anything we need to do where we need engineering and construction documents done. And they're really good. They did the MISCO Green Repair project. It's the first building project of several that I've been involved with where we had 0 change orders. Actually, we had 1 and it saved us money. So that's, based on some of the other projects where engineers constantly are making mistakes and you're just fighting with them. I think they're really good. So they put this together. This is their fee. If you remember, we've got about $680,000 in stabilization for capital projects. That's what's going to fund the majority of this, but not all of this. We will have to fund probably about $100,000 to $150,000 of the cost. I can tell you the boilers at Nipmuc really need to be replaced now. Ken has already opened them up to do the cleanings for this summer, and we're already finding cracks again in the welding and things that we're going to try to get through as best we can so we can get through the year. But the idea is to have this project done next summer. I support this. I think this is something we need to go forward with. I just basically want to bring it to your attention because you guys ultimately are the deciding body. And we'll have to decide as we go forward whether it's just Ken and I that kind of oversee this with Habib and Associates. You could create a building committee. Personally, I wouldn't recommend that. I think it just creates another committee that, this is a small project. This is not a huge project. So I think it can be handled just by internal people. We'll just keep you posted, but that's totally up to you guys as well. Any questions?
Where are the majority of what's in here? Well, that's just for the, where are the majority of the costs for the whole project?
That hasn't, because I haven't even done construction documents.
Okay.
This is basically their fees for the project. They will then do 60% documents, do some cost estimating to make sure we're on target. then complete them. We'll go out to bid, hopefully in December, something like that. Get the bids back in and award the bid at that point. And they'll handle all of this stuff for us. I mean, there's a few things that we'll have to do, but they basically are going to handle it. They're experienced in it. But they've already been on site a couple of times to look at what's there. They've got some suggestions on how we should modify it to make it more efficient and, a better system. The biggest flaw we have in the current boiler is that it's a steel boiler that keeps cracking as opposed to a cast iron boiler that doesn't crack. I don't know why it ended up that way. The 25 years ago when they built the high school, that's what they put in. And I guess 25 years isn't bad for a boiler, although my house boiler is 32 years old, and it's a lot smaller.
So I guess, Jay, two questions for you.
Yeah.
I guess one is, I understand, sometimes there's a school like Misco when it's 50, 60, 70 years old, right? There's old architecture, old design, maybe asbestos, whatever. But given the fact that the school's only 25 years old, is it not just a rip and replace of boilers versus, having an entire architecture team come in and program manage and kind of, I guess, almost GC it for us?
Yeah, it is more involved than that. You can't just, well, first of all, it has to go out to bid.
Right.
All right, in order to put it out to bid, you have to have construction documents, otherwise nobody's going to bid on it. We don't have anybody that's capable of drawing those engineering documents. That's why you hire these guys.
Okay.
So it's not like at your house where you just call, your oil company, they come take one out and put it in. These are much more complex systems. They have to heat, 150,000 square feet. There's two of them actually. I think they're talking about 3 or 4 this time that sort of lead and lag. So there's a lot more involved than just a rip and replace, just like pick a boiler off the shelf and stick it in there.
And then going through the proposal, there's the reimbursable expenses, kind of Article 3.
Yeah,
Is that, I've never seen that in a proposal before.
standard.
Standard for this
Yeah.
kind of thing?
I don't remember off the top of my head all the stuff there, but there's certain things that they just, if they have to spend money on making copies or stuff like that, they're going to charge us for it.
Okay.
Why they don't just include that sort of all-inclusive, I know, where I've done business of my own, it's kind of like this is the cost and it includes basically everything.
Right.
Nobody does that anymore, it's all piecemeal, so that's what they have as reimbursable expenses. They're usually very minimal.
Okay.
I'm not as concerned about that. There were a couple things in there that they're not sure about, like they have to have somebody come in and do asbestos testing, but I'm like 95% sure there's no asbestos in this building. But if you don't do it and then you find it, you've got a bigger problem. So for like $2,500, whatever it costs, it's, cheap change to protect yourself.
Yeah.
So they're gonna go, it sounds, I don't know that this is true, but I'm reading this and I assume that they're gonna go to 60% for specifications, verify it with us, and then we give the okay, and then they do the rest of the documentation 100% while the construction's going on.
No.
Okay.
So 60% is when they go out to a cost estimator, and with that information, they try to estimate what the project's gonna cost. Because quite honestly, like I said, we've got about 680,000. I think we can probably put another 100 to 150 in if we have to. If we get cost estimates that this is going to be 1.5 million, we have a problem, and then we have to rethink how we're going to do this because that would require, capital bond from the town. We don't really want to do that, but at the same time, we do have to replace the boilers. Every year, we spend thousands of dollars keeping these boilers running, and it is ironic that, like you said, Eric, it's only 25 years. It doesn't seem like it's that old, but all I can tell you is that the boilers have these long tubes that keep cracking. We keep welding them. We've had the manufacturer come out and say, gee, this never happens. But the people doing the repair say it happens all the time. We're constantly repairing these things. So it's kind of a little bit of both. But yeah, so they'll do 60%. Then once they get the cost estimates, we say, yes, that's within our budget. Then they finish them completely, put together the bid documents, and put it out to bid. Sense.
Okay, and last but not least, you have your final year-to-date expenditure report for the FY21 budget. I think this pretty much has everything as far as encumbered, or do we still have a few pieces coming in?
We typically have another month of bills that are going to straggle in. Everything on purchase orders has been encumbered. We shut off purchase orders about a month ago, so that's pretty well tied up. But we will have some bills that will still tend to come in. For example, the electric bills come in the very beginning of the month. Those will be for last month. I think we just filled the oil tank because we don't like to leave the oil tank half empty for the summer. We'd rather have it full, so we did that. There'll be some other minor things. So it's really not complete yet because there's also a lot of journal adjustments that will have to get done as we close things out, and that typically happens in the month of July and August. You know, we finalize and close the budget out permanently, I'd say probably mid-August, because I have to have it done so that I can do the end of the year report, E&D, starting in September.
So would you say we're in better shape or worse shape than at the end of last year?
Right now, I think, you know, I saw a balance of about $800,000 still unspent. We typically have $300,000 worth of bills that are still going to come in.
Yeah.
But that's pretty good if we finish with $500,000 left. But we also have some expenses in there that will get transferred to a couple of the grants in order to use up money, you know, the CVRF grant, the remote technology grant. There's a state grant we got an earmark from Senator Moore through the town of Upton. All that has to be spent by the 30th, so we'll typically do a lot of that with journal entries to transfer expenses out. The goal here is to save as much as we can on the operational side. That will eventually roll into E&D and be saved in the school choice account, which protects us for a couple of years out as we try to manage the budget over the next few years, because that's how we get through the 2 or 3 year cycle at the end, you know,
Yep.
assuming we get a good vote in a week.
Okay, that's my report.
All right, we have a bit of a full house here today with some extra guests, so we're going to shift the order of the agenda a little bit. If Vicki, I'm not putting you on the spot too much. That's fine. Okay, so we're going to, next up, we're going to do our subcommittee update from our Golden Apple Awards.
All right. So first off, I'd like to thank everybody who took the time to submit an application. It was a difficult selection process, with many qualified candidates, and we very much enjoyed the opportunity to hear about the exceptional work happening throughout our district and how our staff has touched the lives of so many in our community, particularly during this challenging year. So, without further ado, our first recipient tonight of the Golden Apple Award for the 2020-2021 school year had the challenge of not only engaging a class of kindergartners via Zoom, but also doing it in a foreign language. Parents praised this teacher's confidence, composure, and patience, as well as her engaging and cooperative spirit, while also noting that she is welcoming, caring, creative, and determined. Parents were consistent in their praise of her enthusiasm, noting her enthusiasm for teaching shows up as soon as you enter her room. One commented, her enthusiasm has really made all the difference in my child's year. Yet another noted, her enthusiasm for teaching is contagious, making her students love learning. She has a fun and innovative approach to teaching that makes her students' educational experience unique and positive. Throughout remote learning, this teacher constantly found creative ways to keep her young students engaged through their screens using interactive, student-centered activities, as well as song and dance. One parent commented that her child was always running around the house doing tasks for her, whether it was to find colors in Spanish or moving his body to learn Spanish words. Beyond the curriculum, parents wrote, this teacher exudes empathy, respect, and love. She teaches these qualities both explicitly and by example. She understands the significance of establishing relationships with the students as well as their families, and she goes far above and beyond to ensure the child's kindergarten experience is filled with academic and social learning, as well as memories that will last a lifetime. She has continued to connect with former students on their kindergarten year, checking in frequently and maintaining the relationships she formed with them in kindergarten. To sum it up, here's an amalgam of quotes from various parents. She is the definition of a great teacher. She always showed up with a smile on her face and love in her heart. I could never ask for a more caring and loving person in my son's life and education. An award like this was created for teachers like her. It's my great pleasure to present the first Golden Apple tonight to the Spanish Immersion Kindergarten Teacher Memorial, Olga Grant.
Hi everybody, I don't see you guys. I don't see everybody. I don't know. Can I see? Can you see me? And can you hear me?
You perfectly.
All right. So I'm really excited with my family. I'm waiting on a family trip. We are in Moab, Utah. In Moab, Utah right now. So this is an honor for me. And especially because this award comes from members of the community who are very, very close to my heart. So this is really, really special. And I just want to say, that choosing the path of education was one of the best decisions I have made in my life. And it's also a profession that I have the honor to share with some members in my own family. After working for several years in the field of law, I have no doubt that being a teacher has been the most rewardable experience. Working with kindergarteners is my passion. It's a passion for me. My students are also my teachers. And every day, every year, they leave a memorable mark on me. I take home lots of funny stories that I treasure very much. I have a lot to thank, so I would like to take a time, just a few minutes to thank some important people that have been by my side during this journey. So first of all, I want to thank my family, which is here, my daughters, my two beautiful daughters, my husband, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my other brother from another mother. Because, for being here, for being by my side all the time during this journey, for always being with me, supporting me, especially between the months of September and November, when I become impossible, nervous about the school year starting. To my students and their families, because they are the best reason to go to work happily every day. I want to thank you for your trust, families. To my mentors and Spanish immersion team players, because they inspire me and they motivate me. I could not do my job without them. To you, the school committee, administration, and especially to our wonderful superintendent for his trust in our Spanish immersion program and his unconditional support. And finally, I would like to thank this wonderful country for welcoming us with open arms and for letting us make this place our home. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second recipient tonight is, quote, an excellent teacher who encourages independence and self-advocacy while being supportive and engaging. Parents commented on this teacher's efforts to really get to know and connect with his students and how impactful this was, particularly during remote learning. One parent said, he spends time learning about the students and their interests and lets them know he is someone they can come to if they're struggling. He works with his students to define what it means to each of them to be successful, and then does his best to support them in achieving that. Another said, he encouraged and challenged his students daily. He helped to build their confidence and self-esteem. He took an interest in them, and he continues to maintain relationships with students long after they leave his classroom. Yet another parent commented that her child found a voice in his classroom for the first time. In spite of the challenges of transitioning from remote learning to hybrid and then to full in-person, this teacher did a fantastic job adapting challenging and interesting assignments about civics in ways that worked in an evolving system, and even snuck in mindfulness and mental health check-ins. Parents wrote about how this teacher's lessons became a staple of dinner time conversations in their homes, noting that he encouraged them to think critically about challenging topics and created an environment in which it was safe to just express their thoughts and learn. One of his students wrote, this teacher never expected too much or too little from me, but pushed me out of my comfort zone so I could experience new things when I didn't think I was capable. As one parent commented, he excites kids to talk, discuss, and debate, all while keeping it respectful. He is truly an amazing educator. It's my privilege to present the second Golden Apple Award tonight to MISCO 8th grade civics teacher, Brendan Roseneck.
However little.
I can't talk a lot. Don't you have your ready?
Last but not least, our final recipient tonight was nominated for her dedication to Mendon-Upton High School and to students with learning differences. In her role as an educational assistant in the special education department, she has played a key role in the development of a transitional program for students returning to Nipmuc after extended absences. One parent wrote about how this educator helped ease her daughter's transition back to school following a mental health crisis. She said about her, due to her genuinely kind nature, ability to collaboratively problem solve, and her ability to share hard truths in a way that is both palatable and developmentally appropriate, she earned my daughter's trust enough to get her back into the building and interacting, at least minimally, with her peers and teachers. In the style of "if you build it, they will come," her program, that was not an official program, grew to include other students going through difficult transitions similar to my daughter's. She took nothing and made it into a bridge program at Nipmuc High School. I sincerely believe that if it were not for her, my daughter would not have survived this year, literally. Further, this educator shows her enthusiasm and creativity through her service as one of the class sponsors for the class of 2024. She has managed to motivate and support creative fundraising activities for this class during a very difficult year. In her work in the transitional program at the high school, she engages daily in creative problem solving with students when their emotions prevent them from accessing their education. She recognized that fostering social connection was just as valuable for these students as academics, and creatively found ways for them to connect. She connects with the children in a way that feels safe and supportive. It's an honor to present our final Golden Apple Award of the evening, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, to Rachel DePatti.
I couldn't do any of this without the support I have from my village, and my daughter is on Zoom, so she couldn't be here, but thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I'd love to.
For winners and the school committee, can we do a quick photo op?
We have the same folder up in the back.
I did something, yeah. And let's see those apples, for God's sake. That's gotta be part of the photo.
Where should we stand?
Maybe in front of the screen would be great. That way I don't have to move, okay?
Don't you want to like get closer together?
Yeah.
Should we put Old on the screen in the middle?
Absolutely.
I don't want to be next to the tallest person.
Yeah, really.
Okay.
Are they across the front?
Okay, big smiles, guys, huge smiles. Get the two to the center.
All right, so next up on our agenda, we have administrators' comments.
Joe, you can pull it up, right?
Absolutely, I'm calling it up right now as we speak.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to give you some updates about a lot of the curriculum work that's been taking place over the course of this school year. If you go to the next slide, Joe, thank you. We actually had 3 different groups that were working on curriculum updates this past year, and we formed some teams to review from the beginning of the year or the middle of the year, depending on the depth that we needed to go into it. A little background, and it was in the background notes for you, but In our math, the reason why we formed the math K-8 program was we were in officially our 7th year of using math, a set of resources from Pearson at the middle school. And we were fortunate because of COVID to extend it for an additional year, so we got 1 more year out of them. But that was the last year that it was on that platform, and we couldn't choose to continue with it, so it triggered us to be able to go and do a review. Secondly, we were in our 4th year of Go Math, and Go Math similarly was not continuing with that program. And you probably, those of you who were here might remember the presentation and all the work that went into selecting Go Math when we used that as a program. And so this triggered us starting at the beginning of the year to the end of the year, this review. And what was nice about both of them coming together was the fact that we were able to really look at the continuation of math resources from K to 8, and we've been in different years in the past. The second group that came together was a little bit later on in the year was our science team, and that was made up of teachers from grades 5 through 8. And similarly, we were in the last year of that resource for science, and that again triggered us to look at it. And finally, we received a grant, I'll talk about that at the end, for financial literacy. So right at the end of the school year, we were able to bring together a group in order to purchase some resources for personal finance literacy 9 through 12. I have to thank, I don't know if Jim Mannion's still here, but she was on the team of teachers and administrators in a very challenging year. It was so impressive that they were able to pull off the type of deep dive that we were able to experience with this program review. And one thing about the team was we had representatives. We actually signed up through DESE for it was called a High Quality Instructional Resource Network. And we received additional training from DESE on how to do a program review. A lot of it was similar to what we did about 4 or 5 years ago, but we did learn some new features of what we should do in a program review. And I'll talk about some of those next up. So the math review timeline. For math, we started in about October and November and formed the team and started to attend the DESE network. And we set an instructional vision, which I'll share with you in a moment. And we drafted, they had us draft our priorities and our parameters. And those three, the vision, priorities, and parameters, that's what drove our decision making for the rest of the process. So it was really important we came together to identify what we were looking for. Then we entered the review phase. We confirmed the vision, got some feedback, revised it a little bit, and then we reviewed ed reports and curate. Now, about 4 or 5 years ago, they started to have ed reports, which is external reviews of curriculum materials. Now we have tons of curriculum materials that are in ed reports that we're able to identify and use just the high quality resources that are in there. Curate then takes whatever shows up in green in ed reports, and Curate is a Massachusetts group, and they review, so there aren't as many, but we were looking for whatever feedback externally to guide, and it was almost like a funnel. You start here, there are about 50 that are on ed reports, we set our criteria, and then we go through the funnel. So in the what's called the marketplace review, we had set criteria we were looking for, and it brought us down to about 10 options. So then when we entered into February and March, we had a presentation by vendors. About 5 different vendors came in and presented for an hour to the team. We asked questions, and then we also at the same time received sample materials. And then we narrowed our list down to our semifinalist to finalist round. Because it was the same time as March, I referred to it kind of as a March Madness. We really had all of the teams that entered the brackets. We entered down to the semifinalists, the Sweet 16, et cetera, and down to the Final 4 or so, and then to the finals round, the championship game, which happened in the end of this in about May and June. And one thing that we did, which we didn't do in the past, we did a field test. So sometimes you will have a pilot where you go in a really deep dive of 1 or 2 programs, The recommendation now from DESE is to not do a deep dive, but to actually field test different lessons and units that are similar across multiple different programs, and that's what we did. And I received a ton of great resources from being in the network, so I'm really thankful. I have to thank my friend Wendy over in Uxbridge. They did a great job. Wakefield, we were in a group of about 7 different districts in the math cohort. So after the field test, we received student feedback and teacher feedback from the field test, and we compared it next to a rubric and some criteria. And then in the end, we came to our final recommendations, and overwhelmingly for our math decisions, it was overwhelmingly and unanimous in our choices that I'll share with you tonight. So first I want to share I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but just to get a sense of our math instructional vision, we did a lot of research leading up to this of what should be in a high quality math program, but also brought in a lot of input from our teachers and members of the team. Some of the areas you may notice in there is authentic experiences. You're going to see a lot related back to our strategic plan. Personalization, a lot of discussions around nurturing curiosity and interest. And we also felt the need to identify some mathematical foundations that we really wanted whatever we use to be student-centered, to focus on solution seeking, growth mindset, deeper learning, etc. So as we tested that, we kept coming back to this criteria. If you go to the next page on the priorities and parameters, so the parameters are our non-negotiables, or supposed to be our non-negotiables. You want to hit as many of those as you can. And then we set our priorities, which really is a little bit more aligned to what you saw in the vision. So you can take a look at those. And when we gave feedback, the team used rubrics that were aligned to the priorities and parameters as well. One thing that we learned that we always like to share that was really helpful in our process, when you're looking for high quality instructional resources, there's never, as they told us, there's never a unicorn. There's never the perfect program, the perfect resource. And we use that a lot in our decision making and discussions because someone may say, well, it has all of this, but it doesn't have this one thing. And that's where we look for the supplemental resources. That's where we look for PD. That's where we look for adding in the resources that we need to supplement. But there isn't a unicorn, but I think we're pretty close in what we are putting forward. The next slide is just one of the many examples, and we'd be here all night if I showed you all of the rubric examples, but this is just to ensure you that we first made sure that we were in alignment with the Massachusetts frameworks. All of the resources that we looked at, that was one of the top non-negotiables. And so in here, one thing that we talked about was just the mathematical rigor, and you wanted to have the balance in the triangle between making sense of the concepts, but also the problem-solving application, but also the mathematical procedures and fluency. And it's really a balance of all three. And you'll find that if we were to lay out all of the resources that we looked at, there are some that lean really heavily over here at pure, concepts, kind of a backwards design. You have some that go all the way over here where it's very teacher-directed, but there's a lot in there around fluency. We're looking for, again, closest to the unicorn, something in the middle, but something that also aligns with what our teachers are comfortable with and students are comfortable with moving forward. Next slide. Again, just a snapshot to show you some of the various areas that we actually have an internal mathematic rubric that we use, and some of the questions that people had to respond to related to these categories. When we got into field testing, there was a lot of focus related to quality lessons, quality materials, teacher usability, student accessibility. So some of those were the highlights, the manipulatives that were important in the classroom, so we have hands-on activities. And most of even our semifinalists had most of these elements. So really when it came down to the end, in the finalists, the championship round, we discussed that most teachers and the team members would be okay with either choice, but when it came down to it, they really favored one more than the other. So if you can go to the next one. So for our math selection, the materials were Bridges in Mathematics, and those materials are in grades K through 5. Just gonna pull this up so I can see this a little bit. On the left, I have some of the highlights of what came up in our conversations. So just know that everything's aligned, everything is getting the green reports or green and yellow, but here it was one of the highest ratings, so I wanted to share, even though it's a little blurry, in the right-hand corner, that's just a screenshot of the ed reports. It's one of the highest rated programs, and you can see that it's all in green in there. And Bridges, we have, it's founded on principles of collaborative social endeavor. Learning is a process of constructing meaning to make sense of concepts. The teachers really liked the mathematical discourse. They really liked the visual models. It reminded them when they went back to prior to Go Math in the program that they used before, which was investigations they used for many years, there were a lot of similarities in the type of instructional practice. And they felt like Go Math was high quality, but didn't, in the upper levels, in particular in 4th and 5th, they felt like they needed a little bit, they moved from the continuum here a little bit back this way and landed in Bridges in Mathematics. I wanted to share some of the student quotes and then just a couple of teacher quotes there. So the students talked about how they really like the hands-on activities. You'll see a lot of manipulatives, a lot of working in groups with Bridges. And I like that the grade 4 student said, I like that it didn't give me the answer, which really came up actually because in some of the more older style of instruction was, the teacher will model it and give you the answer. We're flipping it where the students are beginning with some inquiry and then working backwards and then getting to the answer. And that's really what we want. The teacher, I really like this. This program best exemplifies the vision that this committee had for math instruction at the elementary level. This program will challenge all learners, give students meaningful opportunities to solve problems, and to engage in the practice standards that will foster a love of mathematics. All right. Now we went in a different direction in grades 6 through 8. 6 through 8 both had been looking at Reveal, which was McGraw-Hill, kind of similar to Go Math, just a different publisher. And so we went away kind of from the textbook type of model with Bridges, and the same thing happened in 6 through 8, and they went with a more digital model and approach. But there are some similarities in what they liked in the programs when I was putting this together. So the adapted curriculum, Desmos basically is a new math curriculum that's adapted off of open resources that come from Illustrative Math and Open Up resources, which I just gave a screenshot. If I did both of them, they both are in green. So Open Up and Illustrative Math are open resources to anyone. They've taken those resources that are rated in green and they've put it into the Desmos system, which I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it or been familiar with it, but basically tons of online digital tools. Math teachers have been using Desmos just to bring their math to life. Now they've turned it into a curriculum using those other resources as the foundation. And so some of our teachers had been piloting already this past year and were falling in love with it, brought it forward into the conversation. It wasn't one in the start that we looked at because it hadn't been reviewed yet. Desmos was still coming out, hadn't been reviewed by ed reports yet. But as we went through, we realized that this was the best scenario for grades 6 through 8. It's really problem-based lessons, a lot of mathematical curiosity, and I wish if we had the math teachers here tonight, I think I'd love to bring them back in the future to really highlight what this looks like. When you walk through, you can see here's a real-world problem. Students try to figure it out, and then it'll show up on the bottom. You'll see those are all students. If you see those little images, their interpretation of what the question was, and then the teacher can have live feedback and give live feedback to the students on that. And it will also, if they miss the mark, the students miss the mark, it'll kind of go in and give them additional resources to help explain it to them. But the teachers love the feedback, the live data. They love that it's that backwards design with the problem-based instructional approach. But they also found that it had a lot of ways to scaffold for the students who need it as well. There were a lot of comments because it was from middle schoolers, so a lot of the elementary comments came in on paper. So some of the digital comments I received for grade 6, I liked Desmos. It actually helped me learn surface area instead of just telling me what to do to find it. Grade 7, I like how creative Desmos can be, and you can do more fun experiments without materials, and it's more immersive than textbooks. Grade 7, I honestly really like Desmos. That cracked me up. It's really easy to use and has real life examples. And my favorite part is that it has some fun parts of it intertwined with math. Grade 8, I enjoyed this because it was more student paced. And then teachers, this would be a tremendous resource. Desmos is the absolute best, well thought out learning tool for students. It's my only choice after the review. Any questions on math before I jump into science? Okay. If you do, we can come back to it. So jumping into science, 5 through 8, we just as a backdrop, we did a similar truncated version of what we did for the full year. I'll talk about the timeline in a second, but there are a lot less science programs, and they haven't been reviewed by EdReports or Curate. We did look at 1 or 2 that had been reviewed. It didn't end up being the one that we opted with, but they haven't caught up. They focus on mostly ELA and math. I would imagine, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, I'm sure they'll all be in there. They came up with a great science instructional vision. So this is for the middle school. So you can take a look. Similarly, you'll see there's a big focus on the open-ended questions, student curiosity, really having relevant phenomena of what's happening in the world, the doing of science, hands-on activities. So nowhere in here is, let's just have a textbook and have us read about science. It's about doing of science. And they did a great job. And this is actually a picture that just happened right at the end of the year that I threw in there of some solar, I think it was solar ovens that they were trying to do in one of our 5th grade classes. The group also, I had them come up with priorities and parameters as well. So some you'll find are similar, available in Spanish for Spanish immersion, usability for teachers, time, alignment, digital access. And then on the priorities, they anchored in natural phenomenon that challenge student thinking and driven by student questions. Those are probably, those top 3 or 4 were our top 4 choices of what we were looking at when we were diving into the resources. Just as a backdrop, when I'm talking about science, I always like to bring in this visual model for anyone who's not as familiar with the standards. Basically, and you can see how we're aligned at the middle school around the core ideas, life sciences, engineering, earth and space, and physical sciences. And then what all of the curriculum and standards now have are on the top, and those are the practices. So I didn't talk about it in the last one over on math, but they created mathematical practices. Now we have scientific practices. Now with the new history standards, they also have social studies and civic standards and practices. So you're going to see these practices. So it's not just about content anymore. It's about how we're accessing and what we're doing with that content. And so I really like to show this because it has the core ideas and the practices. And then on the bottom, these cross-cutting concepts aren't really part of the Massachusetts frameworks as much as they are, you can correct me if I'm wrong over here, Mrs. Cook, but as much as they are in the NGSS, the national standards. But either way, I really love this image because even if they might not show up as much in our Massachusetts standards, all of these elements are really important to the work that we're doing, and you can see how they flow through each other. So I think that's helpful, especially if it's not your background, to see that. I also wanted to give you just a sample example from the Curate rubric that they have. I pulled from the approach to instruction. about materials using anchoring phenomena to build student understanding, because this was one of the aspects of the rubric that were really important to the teachers to begin with, and then we got to some of the elements later on. So our timeline was very similar, but just shorter. So we formed our team. I think we put an all call out or started conversations as a department maybe in January, but really started this process in February. As a whole department, we worked on the instructional vision. Jen Mannion and I worked with the group with Lori Holloway, who's the department chair, and we set the vision, parameters, and priorities. And then we confirmed it, did the mini marketplace review, had some presentation by vendors in May, reviewed the sample materials, and then narrowed it down. And then we had the field test. And the field test was a little later than we would have liked it to be. It was in June. It wasn't ideal. But if you recall, we basically were testing in MCAS, particularly at the middle school, almost the entire month of May. And we also had the pilot innovative science assessment. And so it was hard to kind of fit in some of the field testing, so it moved a little bit of it back. And they came forward with their final recommendations, and we had representatives from each of the grade levels as part of decision making, but we got feedback through field testing from the teachers and students like we did before. So what they decided was I'll begin with the right-hand side where it says Elevate Science. Our teachers had been using Savvis/Pearson product, and that was the end of life, like I said, of that. What they decided to do is to go to the upgraded version of it, which is Elevate. And that wasn't the intent to stay with the same company, but they found that it was the best one of all of them. It began with a phenomenon. It was designed to immerse students in the inquiry process. These are some of the things that they talked about. They really liked how it incorporated interactive virtual labs and really had a lot of support for the scientific inquiry, but through a digital means as well. They really liked how students are asked to apply what they learned to new scenarios. And assessments, once they saw the new pilot innovative assessment, they found that the assessments that were in here were really kind of paralleled, which I don't know if Pearson is behind some of the assessments for MCAS, it might be, but it was pretty similar, so they thought that was helpful as well, and they were more engaging. And so what I liked about it, because I will say I didn't at first want them, I'm a little biased against some companies at first. I'm like, all right, what do you think? Are you sure that's a big company? But the rep has been great, so I have to give her kudos on that. But what I liked about it is it allows more flexibility in the digital model that they have, where they can move modules around. So if we decide to change where we're teaching, let's say, earth science one year, life science another year, and we want to change where we're doing more spiral approach, you can do it with this product. You couldn't do it with the other products the way it's designed. And so if there's one module we might want to put in a different year, we're actually easily able to do it. I like that just from a long-term perspective with that material. On the left-hand side, you'll see mystery science. I don't know if you recall, but I've seen it at the elementary level, but kids love this. It's highly engaging. We already use it K through 4. It's been gradually over the years expanding up in the grade levels, and our teachers in 5th grade were piloting it this past year. And after reviewing the other programs, they found that continuing with this would be the most ideal, but they also want to dive a little bit deeper into one of the programs we looked at, which was called Amplify. And Amplify was one of the highly rated ones. It didn't really fit for us for 6th through 8, but they want to pilot it in 5th next year and see if it's a fit or not. It's really, it's high quality, but it's very dense. Just one unit, it just far exceeds the amount of time that we have with our students, but it's highly detailed, so they want to try it out next year as a pilot. With Mystery Science, what I love about it is just the awe and wonder that you see with our elementary students who are engaging in the practices. It begins with the question or what a wonder in the world, and that's aligned to the standards, and they go through and are able to do hands-on activities and then follow up. I also like They gradually expanded it over the years where they have a lot more reading and writing that are integrated with it that they didn't have in the first year of the program. And so it's really become a core resource for districts. And then finally, unless you have questions on science.
What was that experience?
Yes.
IT, or was the IT an acronym, or experience IT?
That's, yeah, it's just like their motto, experience it.
Oh, I see, motto.
Yeah. I guess. I looked for a logo for Elevate Science, and that's the only one they had. Yes. But
Oh, wow.
you'll definitely experience
That's a lot more boring than I thought.
Yeah. All right, so financial literacy, we were really fortunate, just a little background. There was an act a couple years ago relative to financial literacy where DESE was required to assist schools in the selection of financial literacy materials and also to provide PD. And we applied for a grant a couple years ago actually, but it was able to be extended, fortunately. So we were just finishing out that grant this past year, but we received a grant for $14,100 for the purchase of personal financial literacy materials and for curriculum development. So I put together a financial team with different members of the high school and different departments. So we have Mary Ellen Kennedy, Ryan Cody, Matt Martin, and Amy Gilchrist. So we have representatives from business, social studies, and math that were involved in reviewing various resources, talking about future planning around how we, basically the goal, and you can see the grant proposal, what I put in it on the right. I pulled out some of the key features of what we said we would do. But the goal is to make sure that beginning, this is just first step, doesn't mean we don't do another grades, but at the high school, beginning in 9th grade, we would be hitting personal financial literacy by the time, 9 through 12. So some approaches we're looking is what standards, and there are standards now, so what standards could be in social studies, what could be in math, what could be maybe in a course that all freshmen take. And so that's the work that this team is going to do with administration, is to go through and review the standards and to identify where it's going to be placed. And they identified the resources that they wanted to use. They recommended the same company, Savas Personal Financial Literacy Textbook, and Jay was working diligently today on some of the other requests for some online resources as well that they are requesting that would really help them launch and go a little bit deeper. We have had financial literacy in different elements of our curriculum, but we haven't designed a coherent plan, 9 to 12. And then once we have that, the goal is to then bring it into the middle school to see if this is what we have at the high school, then what standards do we want to hit at different various levels in the middle school and then elementary. So what are some next steps in all of these areas? Once we're able to move forward, we develop an implementation plan and professional learning plans for next year for the implementation of these new resources. That involves lots of PD planning, but also getting the resources to them, finalizing numbers to order the materials, something that Jay and I work on, setting up the digital accounts, that's something that Dave Quinn tends to do for all the teachers, receiving the materials, working with the curriculum leaders in the buildings to distribute to staff members, and then to dive into it. The goal, one thing going back all the way to math that we're really excited about the math program, and some of our team members are really thrilled, is they provide really high quality math PD through Bridges. It's not just about like, here's a program and how you use it. It's really deep math about the practices, so they're really eager to get started with some of that PD starting this summer, but through our PD days in the year. All right, so that was a lot. I tried to condense it. How long did I go?
So all of the new math, science, and the financial literacy curriculum is to be implemented next year?
Yes. Yeah. And basically what we tried to do is come up with these curriculum reviews, but identifying either if we have new standards or if we're running out of subscriptions to then the year before to start this type of process. So we have a formal review, so you're not just at the end of the year saying, oh, we suddenly don't have the resource that we need. And something that's different, that's I know all of you know, but maybe the audience doesn't know, it used to be you would purchase a textbook, a hardcover textbook, and maybe those textbooks, I've seen some textbooks that are still we're using in history for grade 5, that's next on my list, that are a good 15 or more years old. They're not up to date, they're falling apart. And the teachers do a great job with other resources they need, but what you find is all of the resources, textbooks, materials have that digital component, which we want now that we're one-to-one across the district. And so that means that it is a recurring cost that we need to plan for. And so we try to have it be as much as we can in about a 4 to 5 year recurring type of planning model. It's not ideal. Sometimes it does, we did have a few coming upon us in this past year, more than we normally would, but we were able to work through it and stay within our budget, so we're happy about that.
So we've had problems in the past in transitions from 8th grade to 9th grade, coming from middle school into high school. The kids go through a lot of, especially in the early part of the 9th grade. Do we have any idea of how that's going to change with the new curriculum tools that we're utilizing?
You mean if we're talking math or science? That
Yeah,
I'm
math is a
referencing
good
now?
one.
Yeah. So we bring together our math teachers from the middle school and the high school, and particularly our 8th and 9th grade teachers. And we actually had a number of conversations, which I can mention too, about the continuation of our programming from middle to high school. In particular, where you're entering in different math types of trajectories, at what level is that entry point, and how to make sure our students have what we need at the high school level. So we're having those conversations between the departments this year, maybe more than we have in the past, so I know we'll continue to do that. Using what we're using for Desmos is going to be different than what they have at the high school. At the high school, they use Envisions. We did review Envisions at the middle school, it just wasn't a good fit for the middle school and what our teachers and students needed there. But we do bring them together to discuss that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's always room for improvement there always will be between the buildings in transition, but we've been working towards it. And I would say that the fact that we had the K-8 working on this, that was the first time in a while we've had K-8 math team together. It was awesome. It was great, and they loved working together, and it was just such a high quality team. So we got a lot out of those conversations as well, and learning from one another, and we had mixed groups, and many of them were able to attend some of the DESE instructional network training as well, which just enhanced what they know as well.
So how about MCAS improvements at the middle school? Do you see those being positively impacted by the students?
That's always the goal. So one thing we do look at, and I didn't dive deep into it because I don't want to get too researchy, but we made sure that there was evidence of growth related. Now, maybe every company can show some sort of evidence of growth, but there was evidence of growth in using either of these programs. And so that's something we're always keeping in mind, although MCAS wasn't a criteria on our list, but I would think with the deep, strong instruction that it'll lead to more improvements.
And realize too that what they use as a guidepost, specifically the ed reports, and also curate the programs that score the highest show the tightest alignment with the Massachusetts frameworks, and hence also with MCAS performance as well.
So going back to the funnel, there were some that were a mix of green and yellow, but the ones that we looked at were in the green. So that was the baseline, and then it's what was the better fit for our vision.
I mean, COVID sort of blew up the whole kaleidoscope idea, and that whole.
Well, it's still alive and well, and John and Marianne were still actively involved in the cohort, but yeah, to your point, some of the more ambitious plans and the vision got a little bit derailed, but it's still alive and well.
Yeah, okay, good.
On the financial literacy curriculum, is that something that would be integrated into existing classes like 21st century skills, or do you sort of envision a new class like coming out of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some of that is actually in the air depending on what happens with staffing moving forward. And so we don't have the 100% answer right now, but the plan would be to hopefully incorporate a unit or some elements of it in that 21st century learning. If we're able to do that, then we know that all of our ninth graders, if we have a ninth grade, are able to have that as a foundation. And then we already have personal finance and business, and that's a real deep dive, and they have tons of students that do it. It doesn't guarantee that everyone cycles through that. And then what I'd also like to see, why we brought in social studies, was to look to see which of the few standards, or maybe standards related more towards economics, would be in, let's say, an 11th grade course or 12th grade course. We weren't looking to create a whole brand new course, but to actually have it incorporated into maybe that freshman course. So that's a great question.
Do you have a breakdown of financial impact over the next 5 years? I mean, is it,
Yeah, no,
is
we
it,
do.
we have a higher cost year one,
Yep.
the run out cost, I mean, you talk about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can
Yeah.
tell you, I can explain it. So Desmos is around 24,000, a little bit less than that. We're gonna pay for that in full out of some of our grant money that we currently have in place, so that's gonna be paid in full before we even start. The Sabas thing, Sabas was about 88,000, I believe, and they will only finance it over 2 years, so you're looking at about, say, 44,000 a year over the next 2 years, and then it's paid off. None of these companies, even though you have a 6-year license, will finance it for 6 years. They don't do that. The Bridges program, we're still refining the prices there. I'm hoping that, I think they told me that they would finance for 3 years.
Yep.
I think we're looking at around, the first quote we got was 150,000. I think it's gonna come in less than that, but even if it was 150, you're talking, you know, what,
It would be good when we
50
see the,
year.
when you finalize the pricing, to see the cumulative impact over
yeah.
the life cycle.
So I can tell you, in the budget, we put in 80,000 at NISCO and 60,000 between the two elementary schools for these new curriculums. We're gonna come in under that considerably, just depending on how the pricing eventually comes out, which will allow us to do some other things. But yeah, this is one of the issues with the 6-year licensing, is that you only can finance for 2 or 3, and then you have 2 or 3 years that you don't really have a cost. So we need to get it in a rotation, so that you always have a recurring cost that isn't enormous, as opposed to saying, oh, great, we don't have to pay for that anymore. Now we can use it for this.
Agreed.
And then 3 years later, you get caught because now you need both.
And one way that we've managed that, so we had the Pearson resources, Prentice Hall Pearson at the time, for the middle school. I don't know if you remember, I mean, it was a good 6 years ago, and it was digital resources for all 4 of the subjects. And so with social studies, I'm losing track of my years, but a couple of years ago when they changed the standards, that's when we changed some of those resources then. So we kind of got them out of that 6 year. We had to anyways, because it was a different curriculum and new standards. And then we were able to push off and gain another year. And then our ELA is decided not to go forward with an anthology next year, and they're looking at other more supplemental type of resources to build in what they're going to be working on. And so we're able to break it up so you don't have all of them in 1 year, which is ideal. So then we can say, okay, now here's the year we're working through ELA. And so you'll see the cycle rotating between the largest are always going to be that ELA, core ELA at the elementary, and the core math at the elementary.
That was going to be my question.
And those rotate about 6 years or 3 years. And so we want to be paid off of one before we're renewing and looking at the
So
other.
do they come out with new versions of these curriculums every 3 years?
They
or-
do.
They
They
certainly
conveniently do
It's a
that.
business model.
And then usually you can last up to about 5 or 6 years is what we're finding, where, okay, they can renew this or you can do the small amount, but then sometimes they just completely go off a platform that they're using digitally. So for example, with GoMath, or what they were just using at the middle school, they don't have that digital platform, so it's all brand new. And therefore you have to kind of move forward.
It is a bit of a shame that every district across the country is in a similar circumstance with GoMath right now. It wasn't that long ago, I think it might have been this meeting 7 years ago, that Maureen was presenting on Go Math. I think, Phil, you're probably the only person here that was on the committee back then.
And it was a lot that I presented last
It
week. We
was.
did try
I
to
do
cut
remember
down.
that.
I did try to, I just started.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure you knew we knew, but I tried to cut down today. Yeah.
But they're, so they don't, so the license terms, which year are we picking up these tools in their licensing structure? Are they gonna update us next year?
They never let you know, from what I've found, but they don't just bump you out. There's always legacy for a good 3 to 4 years. Yeah. And then they let you know a couple years
But
out.
if you're inside your 6-year term, can you upgrade for free to the next platform?
Not usually, but sometimes there are certain deals. It
But-
depends on the company, so, that's why I've liked in the past working with McGraw-Hill, because they've done some of that.
Yeah.
And we've been able to either at a really reduced cost, or they've allowed us to kind of continue as something's been upgraded and there hasn't been a cost. But every company is different, and the larger the companies, there's less sometimes that you can get too.
So is an upgrade of the program different than an update of the content?
Sometimes it's both,
Okay.
sometimes it's
So after we
content,
finish
sometimes
paying,
it's
the
usually,
content stagnates?
Pearson? Did it stagnate?
no, it's more they could bring in all the digital. I would say what happens most is all the digital enhancements.
Yeah.
But the content does change based off of changing standards. So if going back to 2012, 2013-ish, we had the Common Core, had the new standards, and then the standards updated 4 years
Yeah.
later. And so then they adjusted, because for for ELA, I remember we were on let's say a 2017, some people went to 220, and you always want to have the most up to date with the standards. Sometimes they'll give you, here's a crosswalk, so you can see what elements, but the more aligned, the easier it is for the teachers.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is new business.
Okay, just quickly as a report out, and something that we're gonna have to delve into during the summertime when the committee resumes in August. DG Energy, who is the solar company responsible for our solar carports and our 2 solar fields, wants to extend our agreements for the simple reason that they're looking to flip the agreement and they want to make it more attractive. Okay, so keep in mind the agreements start, please correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, in 2016, and it's a 20-year agreement. So they're looking to extend it out an additional 12 years through 2048. So basically they're looking for other investors and adding years to the contract so that they have a better market. Again, I just put this on your radar screen. Jay is in the process of kind of doing the negotiation of, if we were to opt for this, what else could they do for the school district? And I don't know if you want to add to that without getting into a lot of painful
That's a very simple
specifics.
way of putting it. Yes, they want to extend the contract. I understand the reasons why. I knew all along that this company would be selling the projects after 5 or 6 years, because typically they invest money, they build a project, they get their money back plus some appreciation, then they push it off to somebody that's more in the solar business as opposed to constructing the solar things. There's 2 pluses to us. One, we will continue to save on electricity, and we do really well with that, so that's very beneficial. But the other piece is, they want an extension from us, which we don't have to do, but they're looking for that because it makes it better for them when they're trying to sell it. I've already asked the question, that's great, we appreciate that we're saving electricity, but what else is in it for us? So that's the process that we're at right now. We haven't really resolved that yet. They are willing to do something to assist us even further. So we just started to talk about it. He just called me a couple of weeks ago. This company, DG Power, owns 2 of our 3 sites. They own the carports and the site in Dayton. The other site we have is to a different company. It's also a 20-year contract. So I'm going to talk to them some more, see what they're willing to do, and then we'll find out. We'll come back to you at that point and let you know what kind of things that they're offering.
I mean, are they estimating that some of their terms may change in the long run?
No, the terms of the contract would be exactly the same. So for example, both the carports and the Dayton site, they started out at a certain price that we pay per kilowatt. I want to say it was 9.5 cents, and that's everything included: supply, all the costs from the grid, everything at all was 9.5 cents. Right now, National Grid's combination of all that is about 18 cents. It escalates. I want to say it's a 2% escalator every year, so it goes from 9.5 to 9.6 to 9. It kind of escalates. They want to just continue that same escalation for their extra 12 years. So we would still be, unless something comes out of National Grid that all of a sudden electricity, instead of being 17 to 20 cents a kilowatt, suddenly is going to be 6 cents a kilowatt, which I don't see happening. It's always going to save us money just to continue to do it through this system. I think that eventually the solar panels, because we don't own them, the companies that do will start swapping out the panels with more modern technology panels that produce even more power, which means we get better net metering credits, but our price is going to remain the same. That's one of the things I would insist on, is we're not going to start paying different terms. But yeah, so the terms wouldn't change. They just want to extend it, and then they have a lease with us, a lease agreement, because they own the carports at Visco. So they want that term to coincide with the contract for the solar power, so that they're tied together.
So let me get this straight. So the 9% was the cost that we pay for their service.
9.5. Like we started at 9.5 cents.
They're going to escalate that on a per year basis by
2%
per year. So
we're probably still under 10, but we're probably pretty close to 10 because it's been about 5 years, I think, maybe 4 years since Dayton started. What I can tell you, real life factors is, for example, I think I shared this with you.
So you could get up to like 12 or 13%.
I think the cap at the time, if we went to 20 years, was like 13 cents, so it probably might get to 15 cents.
All right.
But when it gets to 15 cents, you're still under what National Grid is charging today, and I seriously doubt that they're going to suddenly reduce their pricing at all. The last couple of months, our electric bills from National Grid and all buildings had credits on them. We owe them absolutely nothing. So in essence, we have a $10,000 charge, but we don't pay them anything, but then we pay $6,500 to the solar power, so we're saving 35% of our power. And about 95% of our power is coming from solar production at this point. Now in the winter, it's opposite. I don't know if anybody's got solar on their house. I do. And I know that from March to June, I overproduce, but from July to January, I underproduce in my particular situation. Other houses that have larger systems or use less electricity, you tend to potentially produce well. I think it's something that we need to do and we need to consider, but I just need to find out more about exactly what's involved with it, and also, like I said, what else is in it for us. It's great that they can make more money by us extending the contract, but what does that do for us, other than extend our savings?
Yeah, I guess that part of it is that I think about, what's the benefit of the net metering to pay for it? If they're going to switch out the solar panels, that would be a benefit, or keep the technology up to date every 10 years. That would be a benefit of it, but I'm just trying to understand the longer term benefit for us, because it seems like, we're paying, to your point, we're paying $6,000 or whatever a month. Let's say 70 grand a year. The system, I would imagine, is not. It's probably $1 million system with the carports and everything.
Oh, no. What was the pricing? Probably about $6 million for the carports, probably about $10 million for the Dayton site. They're very expensive, but
What's the size of the carport system?
Megawatt size, I don't know off the top of my head. I know that the site in Dayton, I want to say, was 40 or 50 megawatts or 80 megawatts. It's fairly large. They're talking like a huge solar field, not just, the carports.
I understand but the carports are back in our area.
Yeah,
that's an investment they made in us. The Dayton is just like, we're generating power and we're buying it from them.
Well, same thing with the carports in reality. They do feed back into the building, which means we don't pay National Grid, but then we pay them for the electricity.
So do we get net metering off of Dayton as well?
We get net metering from Dayton, and it's not net metering from the carports. It's just straight feeds back in, and the meter will spin backwards if we overproduce. But we do pay them based on their production, so that's metered as well.
It would be interesting to take a look at the whole balance of how this is paid off for us over the last few years. Just take a look at it based on what they said and the pieces that are there.
Yeah, I mean, I can go and pull through and do an analysis.
Well, especially as the costs go up, because that's where I'm not sure what's really going on there for the total cost we pay to them for the service.
All right, so
that's why we really should look at the balance.
yeah, no, it's easy to do if you just look at the electric bills. It has the total charge to National Grid, and then it has the net metering as a credit to offset that charge.
Yeah.
So it's pretty clear on the bills. It's just a lot of bills to go, but we can easily do that, over the next couple of months or so. I didn't give any answers at all. I said, look, it's something we're going to consider, but you need to understand it's going to take a little bit of time.
Okay, just do a quick screen share. For members of the committee, there isn't a lot here that you haven't seen before, but I just kind of wanted to reiterate the importance of the week, the vote a week from tomorrow. And again, the reality of that failed override for the amount of $803,338. And again, the reality is we do not have an officially approved operational budget for FY22. That is our current status. So again, because of Upton's proportional share, the actual loss in funding to our communities, to the regional school district, is a little bit more than $2.1 million. So again, as I had said before, in making up that $2.1 million, anything that we put forward as far as was new or restored positions, and you see them listed there, the school adjustment counselors, instructional intervention coaches, library media specialists at NIPMA, fourth grade teacher at Memorial, and the technology support position all have been eliminated. And then other non-personnel cuts have been executed. Reduction of textbook series, both at the elementary and the high school level. The reduction of 2 Norfolk Aggie tuitions, because we believe that there will be 2 less students matriculating there from the 8th grade. No additional investment in athletics, both at Nipmuc and Misco, but however, concomitantly increasing athletic user fees to $400 per sport, to make the programs more self-funded. Those 2 represent a swing of about $95,000. Other things such as the Mass Insight project, which is support for our AP program, is also a cut. Reduction of professional development dues, conferences, and fees, a little bit more than $65,000. And then the elimination of the department chair leadership, both here at Nipmuc and also at the middle school, equaling another $75,000. So that gets you another $367,363. So unfortunately, you have to, as I discussed at the last meeting as well, eliminate positions. And you can see what the eliminations here are at Clough Elementary School, a special education position, a reading specialist, 4th grade teacher position, nursing assistant, kindergarten Spanish immersion teacher, and you see part-time Spanish immersion aide, and also half-time paraprofessional. Kind of more of the same with regard to a reading specialist, a special educator, a technology teaching position, I had, after last meeting, a couple parents email me and say, well, why that disparity? I think you'd be looking at a situation going back to the future like it was 8 years ago, where you had a technology teacher splitting their time between the two elementary schools. A kindergarten teacher position, an academic tutor, a paraprofessional, and an ABA tech position. I had a parent say, wait a minute, I don't understand. Can't we just cut all the positions from Mendon, seeing that the support wasn't there? That's not the way it works in a regional school district, and in looking at the positions, we kind of did it commensurate based upon enrollment in our 4 schools. Misco Hill Middle School, 8th grade science teacher, 2 special education teaching positions, a 5th grade teaching position, a band and music teacher, 1.5 FTEs, world languages, really taking it hard, 1.4 FTEs, and the non-replacement of a speech language pathologist position. So that's 7.9 FTEs, and then at Nipmuc Regional, an additional 5.5 FTEs from 2 social studies teacher position, 1 English teacher position, the career and innovation coordinator position, half of a choral teacher position, and 1 admin assistant position. And I think I mentioned the district-wide network support technician position. So all told, it represents 28.22 FTEs or full-time equivalents. I should note, since the last meeting, we've had 3 positions, people notify me that they've gotten positions in other districts or other opportunities elsewhere. So as we said throughout this entire process, for teaching positions, it's very much a buyer's market right now. So unfortunately, we're starting to see the migration of talent that unfortunately received layoff notices. So again, what this means programmatically would be the reduction of 2 strands of SI, and I think we had talked about having healthy numbers in Mendon for the first time in quite some time, and as a result, being able to run those 2 strands, 1 at Memorial and 1 at Clough. As you can see, the reduction of special education, intervention, and literacy support services, particularly for our youngest learners, where they're the most effective. Class sizes pushing in the high 20s, in one case 31 in select grades, and then the reduction of electives, and again, particularly technology, where again, we'd be going back to the future of having technology only for our 3rd and 4th grade students. I can tell you, because the middle school is very efficient in its scheduling, you'd be looking at class sizes in that 27 range for grades 5 and 6, and pushing 30 in grades 7 and 8. A drastic reduction of our electives, specifically band and chorus, art, and world languages. And then, unfortunately, a reduction of services for our students who really have some significant SEL needs, and looking to do more with already what we put in place starting last school year, the Bridge program. At the high school, I think I alluded to this, because you're cutting different content areas, it looks differently because then you also have different levels, but I can assure you in every content area you will have some classes with class sizes over 30. Again, like our elementary and middle school, reduction of elective opportunities for all students, less support, less resources for our AP program, and then as I said before, the valuable role that our department chairs play will not be there, so therefore it's cuts to instructional leadership. And again, something else that's very, very challenging is going back to the future where we were back in 2011, 2012, with very, very high user fees for all of our Nipmuc sports. I think we've also touched upon the concerns with regard to Nipmuc's accreditation status, that going back to 2019, when the library media specialist position was eliminated, and we've kind of been going with a Band-Aid approach and having a para-educator in that role, the school has had to file over the last couple of years a substantive change report talking about the good faith move that the administration and our community has made to put that position back in place. I think the reality of this current situation is by the end of this month, being a member of NEAS, the school has an obligation to file an additional substantive change report talking about the budgetary effects of where we are right now. So I do have concerns, as I've said before, should this not be restored, that a deleterious effect will be on Nipmuc's accreditation status. And as I said before, two options are either warning status or probation status. So as I've said before, without the support that we could see on June 29th, there will be a regression in the programs and services of all of these things that you see in this funnel that make our school district attractive. And then the converse of this is with support, we will be in a similar situation that we were back in 2015 with that second override vote. We had said back then, with appropriate support, we could sustain ourselves for a period of 5 years. We're essentially in the same exact situation that we were in 2015, and hence, if we do have the support and we have the resources that we need, we can sustain ourselves through 2025. So again, I know that that is a repeat for those of you on the committee. I share that for our families that could be watching at home or watching through the Zoom link, that this second vote on Tuesday, June 29th is of paramount concern for the immediate future of our school district.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have community comments. Anyone watching from home, if you could please raise your hand, and when recognized, please state your name and the town in which you reside. See that part of it.
Receiving no hands.
Okay.
There is one comment in there. Would you like me to read it out loud?
Could you please?
Absolutely. This is from E. That's the only name that was given. With the regional school district, if a class is oversized to memorial, will equivocating the class size by sending some students to Clough be explored? Could parents opt in? If transportation is not feasible, could a family opt in and transport their students to Clough? Generally, class sized at Clough seem to be smaller than Memorial.
I can answer that on a lot of different levels. Generally speaking, there isn't dramatic differences across the whole of class sizes at Clough versus Memorial. Memorial, it recently has had a little bit more of a spike in enrollment than Clough. But if you look across the grades, and I would welcome E to go to our budget documents where we have all of the average class sizes. They're very, very similar. That's not a pragmatic solution for the simple reason that one bus on average costs about $100,000 per year. So to think about the viability of saying, okay, I'm going to take this X group of students from, Upton and bus them to Mendon just is not a very feasible, solution. As a matter of fact, if I had that extra 100,000, I would use it towards personnel, to help cut down class sizes.
And seeing no further questions, we'll move on to correspondence.
So you have in your packet a really, really nice letter from the Upton Board of Health, just recognizing the remarkable work of our school district personnel, to the nursing staff, and they really highlight Leslie McGinnis and Nancy Robbins, who really stepped up big time in just the work at the high school, and particularly recently in the last 2 or 3 months, some of the work that they've done around vaccination clinics for the public on a whole, for our educators, and then most recently for our students age 12 and up. And they also recognize our school principals, our administrative team as well, in just organizing everything and communicating everything and keeping everybody safe through, let's just say, a memorable year. So much appreciated from our partners on the Upton Board of Health.
That's very nice. Okay, any other matters anticipated by the committee within 48 hours of the posted meeting? And hearing none, we move to future agenda items, which would include the fiscal year 2021 budget closeout on August 23rd, and an update from Senators Fatman and Moore on September 13th. And from there, we'll roll call to executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, exemption number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with the Regional Teachers Association, because doing so in open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. The committee will not return to open session. Roll call vote.
Vicki Lovelace, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Phil Desutter, aye.
Eric Brown, aye.
Okay, and with that, we are adjourned at 8:38 p.m.